Hi, Pavel. Thanks so much for joining us today. Really nice to have you back on the show.
Hello. Thanks for the invite.
Last year, you came on the show to talk to us about a report that was titled Welcome to Barbie Land, which drew an analogy between the disillusionment of the residents of Barbie Land and the experience of some European citizens in our own supposed utopia of the European Union. I wasn't surprised to see that this year also begins with a movie analogy. Could you tell us which movie you chose and what you wanted to convey with that?
Yeah, as you can imagine, I didn't want to spend the rest of my life living in the shadow of the Barbie land. So I knew I needed a new metaphor. And this one emerged pretty easily as I watched Europe getting humiliated on every occasion during the summer at the NATO summit and then with the tariff dispute with the US president. And that's when I felt that the Truman Show analogy describes Europe's situation very well.
And
Uh,
so, in this analogy, Truman is the European Union, right?
Europeans are the
Okay.
Truman. I focus on the European Union, 27 countries, but in a way, Switzerland, Britain, Norway are not very much different.
And we're being controlled by the puppet master, the director that is the US,
There,
right?
there is the director and a man who enjoys running the show, but I think that there is also a director's crew. So Donald Trump has his allies across Europe who help him make Europe part of a culture war. That's what I'm arguing in the paper, saying uh, that Donald Trump is trying to shift the ideological center of European politics, and that's where those allies across Europe, the ideologically allied parties and movements, are very useful. I'm not, by the way, sure whether people still recognize the movie. It's coming from almost 2 decades ago, but it was part of my cultural education. That's why.
Me too. It made
Me
such
too.
an impression on me. I remember
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, what is this world we're living in?
And
So,
I rewatched it with my daughter who is 9 years old, and she said this is the best film she's ever seen. She wanted to
oh,
watch it again. So you don't have to wait until you are 18 in order to
Mm.
watch it and understand it. But yeah, to finish my point, so I felt that in the movie Truman could spend his fake life thinking that everything is real and going through those daily challenges of going to work, talking to his wife, mowing the lawn. But then once he realizes that there is something beyond it, that there is an artificiality in everything he is doing, and that there is a greater battle, then that changes everything. And I felt that Europeans should also realize, European leaders, but also citizens, that there is a bigger battle in which Europe's identity is at stake. Either we demonstrate that we are subordinates and not autonomous in defining who we are, or we realize that actually we might need to say stop to the director on various occasions, even if that sounds dangerous and irresponsible, because what's at stake is our autonomy, identity, and also credibility towards people in Europe and to the rest of the world.
So you devote much of your report to describing the EU-US relations as a multifaceted culture war. So could you maybe try to tell us in a nutshell what do you mean and what's at stake in this war?
So there are two levels of this war. That's why this metaphor of a Truman Show is so helpful. There is something which I think most analysts accept right now as a cultural. We see that at this more conspicuous level, Donald Trump and his people are trying to change European politics. That's why Elon Musk and J.D. Vance, Vice President of the U.S., were so active in supporting AfD ahead of the German elections. That's why Donald Trump supported Karol Nawrocki so much in Poland, and my feeling is that it was helpful, and also it's not just about what becomes a center of European politics. So by this I mean discussing issues which are very much American, like wokeism, but also finding parallels between what thrills the MAGA movement and the European New Right, like migration, climate issues, etc. But so this is one thing, that there is also an effort very visible in J.D. Vance's speech at Munich Security Forum, where he tried to define an opposition between Europe and America in how the two sides of the Atlantic understand the West and freedom and democracy, saying that actually what we observe in Europe today is a democratic downsliding. And Europeans were shocked to hear something like that from their close ally. Anyway, so this is one level. It's about values which are at stake, and what defines European values, and whether we can still believe that we are part of the West together with America. But then there is this other level, which is about identity, and for me, identity is also about culture, because it's about who we are, and I feel that it's a little bit harder to make a point and to convince people that they should see this as a culture war, especially since Donald Trump wouldn't be very effective if Europeans themselves, if European leaders, most of all, didn't let Donald Trump humiliate Europe. I've seen this stubborn effort on the part of the U.S. president to use any opportunity to put Europe in a very stupid position, and that was the case of the tariff war, where we simply were forced to accept something which was the least worst of the scenarios, and this proved our limited autonomy. But what I remember the most from this entire story was Ursula von der Leyen standing with a smiling face, with a thumbs up finger. Several other of analysts, some of them my friends, also quickly described this as a moment of European humiliation. And by the way, during the summer, we have heard a lot about this being the summer of humiliation, this being the beginning of a humiliating century for Europe. I don't agree very much with the suggestion that from a summer of humiliation you need to necessarily go to a century of humiliation. But I very much see the point. I've seen this also on the occasion of the NATO summit, and also in a way in which European leaders and countries were treated by Donald Trump when it comes to peace in Ukraine negotiations. Yeah. But he wouldn't be able to put Europeans in such a stupid position if the European leaders themselves weren't that shy to stand up and to somehow defend Europe's autonomy.
So if we take a step back to the culture war element of it, like, what do you think the European Commission specifically could do to fight this culture war with the USA? Like, what would it look like? How do you fight back?
And why are you specifically interested in the European Commission?
Well, because you just mentioned Ursula von der Leyen putting her thumb up, and also because you mention it in your report that you think they should take a leadership position. So, yeah.
But I also need to stress that I disagree with the tendency of blaming Ursula von der Leyen for everything. So the reason why she has been put in a silly position as a result of European countries not being ready to stand up and to agree on a more assertive position among themselves.
Well, then if we look a bit more broadly, like, how in general do any European liberal governments effectively reclaim the discourse and fight back against this like free speech narrative that JD Vance introduced in Munich?
I will be disappointing here. I don't think that there is a one sentence answer, and there need to be several ingredients for Europe to actually come up with an assertive response. Because part of the problem is that there is the European mainstream, center left, center right parties who have very often veered so much to the right in the hope of stopping the hemorrhage of their voters, that they can hardly stand as for the values that that were foundational for them, and therefore I think that there is a homework for those parties, which is part of the solution to the problem we are describing. I suggest that they should be bolder in using Europe as an asset. For example, there is a discussion about so-called European democracy shield, where European Union should be able to defend democracy within the EU. So when there is a democratic backsliding in some countries, there should be tools to address it. And I think that this is an interesting tool, but if it is not accompanied by the liberal mainstream somehow repairing their ways of doing politics, then it will very, very easily be exposed to accusations of hypocrisy. So you have this mainstream who behaves like far right and copies their solutions on migration, for example, veers increasingly towards xenophobia, but at the same time preserves the ability of saying who is good or who is bad in politics, and what is democratic sliding and what is not. And also, European Union as a European Commission led by Ursula von der Leyen could get more of a leadership in demonstrating an assertive position towards the US on trade, digital, or security front. And this year, European Union decided not to use for example, its arsenal of trade tools with which it could threaten at least some sort of retaliation to the threat of the American tariffs. But the European Union didn't do it not because Ursula von der Leyen decided that the best way to solve the problem is to appease Donald Trump. The European Union didn't do it because there was simply no support among the EU 27 countries, most of which have various real or imagined dependencies on America.
You devoted quite a bit of time to like explaining how European leaders lack initiative in actively shaping their relationship with the US, and we're rather just reacting to what they're throwing at us rather than acting actively. What do you think are the reasons for that, and why did we allow ourselves to be in this position?
I think that there is still a lot of complacency among European leaders and the public alike when it comes to our relationship with America. So at ECFR, we conduct public opinion polls regularly. And the last poll we did was in May this year. And that's where we saw that it's still, despite the half a year of Donald Trump's second presidency, it's very hard for people to accept that there might be a major shift in the relationship with America. Most people in most countries believe that, Donald Trump is just a moment of crisis, but once his presidency is over, we'll come back to normal.
And do you think that's true?
And I don't think it's true.
No.
And I don't think it's true because I talk a lot to people from various parts of the political political scene in America, and what I see is that First of all, there is a lot of energy on this Trumpian side of politics, and therefore I think that the baseline scenario for us should be that after Trump 2.0, there will be perhaps Vance 1.0 and Vance 2.0. Perhaps somebody else, but simply a prolongation of Donald Trump, maybe even radicalization in some respects. But also when you talk to people from the Democratic side, you also feel that there is no coming back, that even on that side of the political spectrum, it's, for example, clear that America needs to diminish its military presence in Europe, and therefore that Europeans need to take a greater responsibility for their own security. I feel that this message is not setting in among European minds. Simply, it's hard to imagine that we might be having a bigger problem with America. One issue is security, where we need to take a greater responsibility for it, but also the fact that Donald Trump's America is interfering in European politics, which we have seen not just in Germany and Poland, but also in Romania and several other countries. I think that it is not treated sufficiently seriously across the political sphere in Europe.
You are almost certainly right about that. One other thing you found in your polling, though, was that kind of surprisingly, at least as far as I'm concerned, the feelings of European sentiment are staying really strong, according to your polling.
So listen,
why do you think that is?
So for this project, we are not conducting any new poll, but we are using all the available polls that we conducted or others have done, and despite the fact that people like or hate Eurobarometer, I enjoy looking at Eurobarometer data a lot. I think that they are underexploited.
Could you just say, for those who are not in the know, what is Eurobarometer?
Eurobarometer is a regular polling done for the European institutions, both the European Commission and the European Parliament, and the usefulness of it, the main usefulness consists in the fact that it's done regularly and for several decades already. So you can see long-term trends, and which people rarely do, and therefore it's really good to use it and draw people's attention on some of the very clear trends that are under discussed, I feel. And one of them is people's trust towards the EU. Currently, a majority of people across the EU say they trust the bloc, and the level of this trust is highest since 2007. There was a period, something like around the economic crisis in the Eurozone, where the trust in the EU dropped tremendously, but it has fully recovered, and it looks like especially the various crises of the past few years, especially COVID and then the war in Ukraine, have stabilized a quite high level of trust in the EU among the European public. Secondly, what we see in various surveys of ECFR and conducted by others is that in many countries, the understanding of what the EU is about or should be about is undergoing a shift as well. So for this project, we have been working with researchers in each of the 27 member states. So they were also looking at their national studies and polls, and many of them were flagging to us that there has indeed been this change in the way Europe is discussed, as no longer just an economic project and mostly a market, but as a geopolitical being whereby its democratic element and its also security element is coming more and more to the forefront. So it's not just that people across Europe largely trust the EU. And I'm not saying that the picture is uniformly rosy. There are countries where distrust clearly prevails, and those include France, Greece, Cyprus, Slovenia. There are places where that trust has decreased over the years. So it's not uniform. But if you look at the broader picture, then definitely you should conclude that the glass is at least half full.
So you suggest that Europe could achieve strategic autonomy in defense, tech, and energy. I would love to see that happen. And what are the most immediate and feasible steps for the EU to move towards this goal?
In energy, you are asking about energy.
Yeah.
Defense, tech, and energy.
Yeah. So listen, I should have said that the reason why I mention in that study the strength of the European sentiment is that I believe that this is Europe's key asset in fighting a culture war with Donald Trump's America. I feel that by looking at the polling data, we can see that there is an appetite among large swaths of the European public to be assertive. And when European leaders cave in, they disappoint those hopes of the European public. I feel that we can make the case based on the polling data that many Europeans would expect Europe to be more ambitious in how it defends its identity and its values. And at the same time, there is a danger that if you show that Europe is not really ready to defend itself and its autonomy, then also people's trust in European Union could decline. So for me, as I said, there are several elements, ingredients of the answer as to how Europe could fight the culture war with Trump's America. But one of those ingredients is about also leaders in national capitals and in Brussels to make concrete steps towards autonomy in security, energy, also a digital sphere. And it's quite clear that European countries and institutions are not doing all they could on those fronts. And I think that also in the security field, you have this never-ending discussion about building strategic autonomy in Europe. I need to recognize that there is a growing appetite among some Europeans to entertain with such a project, because a couple of years ago, before the war in Ukraine, it was only Emmanuel Macron talking loudly about it, and now there are other leaders. The new chancellor in Germany, on the day of his electoral victory, he promised that he will be fighting for Europe's independence vis-a-vis America. Although since then, given the difficulty of his coalition government, he has a little bit softened his message. But I feel that there is an understanding among much of the EU 27 capitals that Europe needs to increase its defense spending. That's why those NATO commitments in The Hague at the beginning of the summer. But there is very little discussion as to how to spend that money wisely. It looks rather as if Europeans were saying that, okay, we will spend more on defense just to placate Donald Trump so that things can stay the same rather than so that they can change.
Well, to bring it back to the Truman Show as we close, I was amazed to hear that there's this clip from the Truman Show where there's a newspaper that's shown during the film where there's a headline that says, "Who needs Europe?" And I was thinking maybe we need to get to a point where we can have a headline that says, "Who needs the US?"
Wow, I think that's a great summary. Although I want to stress that what I'm suggesting is not decoupling from America, and let me put this as a conclusion. That I feel that once Europe gets ready to be more assertive, and once it defends its autonomy in a more assertive manner, then we will be finally able to reestablish the relationship with America as peers and not as subordinates. So that would be my my prescription for Europe today. They should think of it of fighting this culture war with Donald Trump's America not as something which risks cutting us out from the North Atlantic Alliance, but rather as the only way for us to be real partners in that relationship.
Great place to end. Thank you so much, Pawel, for joining us.
Thank you
It was
so
really
much.
great once again.
Thanks.